URL ready, be ready to ask the right kind of questions. Now, coming to tonight's session, we have Shailendra Marathe here. Shailendra is a senior finance professional with more than 25 years of experience in business finance. He's a chartered accountant and alumnus of IIM Bangalore. We are very happy to have you with us, Shailendra. Welcome to this session, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, good evening. This is Shailendra Marathe here. Extremely sorry for joining this meeting late. Some struggle with the technical aspects as usual. So sorry about that, but let me start without wasting much time. So most of you are interested in products, and that's why you're joining this webinar organized by the Institute of Product Leadership. So today what we're going to talk about is 5 product pricing strategies that ensure your success. Right? That's what we're going to focus on. What I intend to cover in next about, let's say, 30 minutes is what are the typical challenges that we see in product management space. So that's the agenda, slide 2. And then strategic importance of pricing quickly. And then we'll move on to those 5 innovative pricing strategies that are successfully being used many leading companies across the world, and that you can also look at implementing for your business. Next slide, please. So why pricing and why we are talking about it, right? So a lot of studies have been done as to the impact of pricing on many aspects of business. We'll talk about the impact on price, the other aspects of strategy. But one study which was done for about 2,463 companies, which is a fairly big sample, showed that mere 1% improvement in price leads to an improvement in profit of about 11%. And that increase is more than the increase that we can potentially achieve by increasing the sales volume and or by reducing the cost, fixed cost or the variable cost, right? So that's why pricing is very important. That's a topic that is very much neglected by many entrepreneurs, and they focus a lot on cutting down costs, which has its own consequences and limitations. Even legendary investor Warren Buffett has said, the single most important decision in evaluating a business is pricing power, and potentially with that in mind, he invested in businesses like Coca-Cola long before somebody would have thought, they will become some of the biggest brands in the world. Moving on to the next slide. So what are the typical challenges in pricing products? So I think most of you being the product professionals would be aware about this, and there would be more challenges beyond this. One is today there is a competition across the borders, and some of the big competitors who have large capacities would be willing to discount their products for the market share. Today we are in the midst of a controversy between India and China, where we are talking of a lot of product dumping happening from China, for example, right? So that's a classical case of somebody using something called a marginal pricing approach in order to sell their products across the border. Today there are reduced funding options. The cash burn could be tremendous, and there may be well-funded competitors that we compete head on. There's a lower demand specifically from COVID crisis right now. Much more uncertainty in the environment, and obviously the capital expenditure is being curtailed or postponed as much as possible by many companies. Beyond that, specifically in the context of something like technology products, there are complexities of pricing intangibles which exists, and then there is a pricing of how do you price innovation versus legacy, right? So if you are innovating something, obviously you are new to that space, and there is no set expectation as to what would be the right price for that particular product. So that remains there. There are challenges around how do you target the right kind of customers. How do you ensure that the customers do a right kind of self-selection? Because if the customer selects appropriate product, the chances of that customer being happy subsequently is of course higher. And then of course, how do you convert, right? Because a lot of marketing spend goes into reaching to the customer, and if the conversions don't happen, then we have wasted a lot of time as well as effort in trying to get that business. The cost of customer acquisition is a challenge. So, and then today we have digital and legacy media, and the cost could be exorbitant in both unless we are able to target right kind of customers, qualify them, ensure they do a proper self-selection, and then they convert into paying customers. We need to understand and demonstrate customer value. Quantifying the value is always a challenge. we have to understand not only just our product and what it delivers, but also how customer values whatever we are delivering to them, right? So a very good understanding of the industry is required. And then there are issues like, retention versus churn. So customers keep moving from one product to another. We had Flipkart, which was a big player about 4 years back, and then once Amazon came, it sort of became a leader. There were few other players, and we don't even remember the names today, right? And there were heavy investments made into those building those companies. And then there is a humongous cost of customer education, customer service, and so many other challenges, right? So while we see a lot of successful product companies, there are challenges of pricing the product in itself, right? So that's one thing that we have to keep in mind, and I believe a lot of you will be aware about it, so I'll not spend too much time on this. So moving on, uh, how does the pricing impact different kind of decisions? So it starts right with product design. Whenever you are designing a product, you have to take some things into account. We'll for example talk about the strategy of providing choice to the customer, and the provision of choice has to be inbuilt right at the time of product design. Your technology team, your marketing team, which is giving inputs, has to take that into account. Just as an example, yeah, it goes into your entire building of the marketing strategy. It goes into the customer acquisition, how you are basically going to acquire the customers, how you are going to convert the customers. It goes into selling, what kind of a sales plan, for example, you will have for your sales teams. Will you be selling through channel partners? What kind of distribution commissions you will give to them? How your revenues will accrue. For example, if your pricing is one-time license, then you will have to spread that out over at least a few years, because the customer will be using the product for large period of time, right? And so on and so forth. So I'll not talk about each of these aspects in detail, but as you can see, almost all of them are impacted by the decision that we take on the pricing aspects, and in turn they impact the pricing decision. So it's a two-way process. Moving on. At this juncture, I would just like to ask you a question. So please, a poll is coming up. So the poll is very simple. Today, are you able to link your pricing strategy with important strategic decisions? So we looked at it, just some time back. What are those pricing decisions that we can that are linked to the strategy? So are we able to link? The answer could be simple: no, we don't link it today. It could be yes, no, which is we partly link it, but not able to take pricing into consideration in all aspects, strategic aspects of business, or yes, we do link, and we are aware of that, and we base our strategy based on the pricing aspects, right? So it's a simple poll. So please go ahead and vote on this poll. We'll keep the poll open for a few seconds more. Great. So the results indicate that yes, we do link. So that's about 44% do link. So which is fantastic. There are about 40% who partly link some aspects of strategy to pricing, and about 15% who don't link. So thanks for giving me that feedback. So it's really very good to know that we are aware of intricacies of pricing and how to use it in making important strategic decisions. Fantastic. So moving on. If you look at somebody like Phillip Kotler, also for example, the guru of marketing, one of the very important thing he says is pricing is the only element in the marketing mix that produces revenue, right? There's so much of time that goes into the other aspects, uh, whereas those other elements only produce cost, correct? So there is one thing that is very important. So that's why we are discussing how basically we can look at pricing, and which are the best strategies to look at specifically from the product's perspective. Uh, Moving on, if you look at the different kind of pricing strategies, we can slice and dice and put them in different ways. In my book, I have basically classified them in using some criteria into traditional, modern, sales-driven, risk-reward, and innovative pricing strategies. Right, and then we'll look at some of those strategies that are relevant for pricing products. These are on the next slide. So which are those 5 strategies that are relevant and very successfully being implemented by many leading organizations? One is around creating a choice for the customer. The opposite of that is basically giving a yes or no, yes no kind of a pricing to the customer, where if the customer either takes that particular deal or he says no, right? So we'll look at how to create a choice. The another one is using of an anchor or using a decoy. These two typically go hand in hand, but these are two different elements. Then charging by the pay-per-use model or the transaction-based pricing or pay-per-drink model. One more is onboarding the customer with freemium, so which is basically giving them free plans in the beginning and then converting them into premium paying customers, right? The next one is bundling and unbundling the products. For example, maybe creating modularization of the existing product to see that we can target a particular niche within the entire business process. So these 5 strategies we'll discuss in slightly more detail, starting with creating of the choice. So if you look at this slide which has come up, right? So I've just put up example of, so I subscribe to Airtel broadband, right? So this is something that the broadband service provider shared with me some time back. So if you look at something as simple as broadband, which is technically a commodity product, right? So and it's very difficult to sort of create choice within those particular kind of commodity products, right? So but over a period of time, they have learned as to how you create choice and target different micro segments within your customer segmentation, right? So there is a plan which starts with approximately 800 rupees, 100 Mbps and certain quantity of data, which is 150 GB, and moving on to 999, 1599, etc. And there is a plan which is around 4,000 plus GST, and which is basically 1 GB and unlimited data, right? So there are different plans that are given, and then the customer is basically having a right amount of choice, right? If you do not give choice to the customer doesn't have a benchmark to compare against, right? If I go into a shop and I see I want to buy a shirt, and I want to buy a blue shirt and I want to buy a formal blue shirt, right? That's fairly good description. So I think very clear on what I want, right? But when I get into a shop, if I get 3 or 4 shades of blue to look at, then I can make my mind much better and I can sort of take out my wallet and pay for it. But if I find only one blue shirt over there, I may not take the buying decision, right? So it has been researched and found that giving a choice to the customer is very good. The customer starts comparing within those choices rather than moving out of that frame and then comparing with something else, right? So also giving these kind of choices and making them very thoughtfully makes it difficult for the customer to compare the products of some other provider. Now broadband is a fairly it's a fairly commoditized product. I mean, what we get is simply data, right, with a certain speed. But within that, if you look at this plan, what they have done is they have combined with few more things, right? So they are giving something called Airtel Extreme. They are giving Netflix. I think they are giving few more things, right? So what they are doing in the process is that they are creating a differentiator within each of these versions or variants of the product, because at each particular price point, you must provide a differentiated value proposition to the customer. You can't just create choices without the customer being able to clearly see why I am being asked to pay more when I move from one choice to another choice, right? So you have to be very careful in deciding that. It's not something which is easy. One more thing you will observe over here is that all those products are very well compatible or complementary to what the Airtel is selling, right? Netflix, if you get it or anything like that, is going to consume a lot of data, right? They are not giving you something like a coupon for maybe one Hussein shirt, or they are not giving you something like maybe you can have idli in iddos or something like that, right? They are giving a product which is actually complementary. That product needs this broadband service provider, and the broadband service providers are able to get more business because we are today consuming a lot of data, and specifically around this kind of streaming services, correct? So they are creating this this kind of a bundle or a choice very thoughtfully, right? It's not just sort of given the way it is. And then there are some other things, unlimited local STD calls, which have sort of become very cheap today. They are giving it on top of that because they know, for example, giving this gives a good sort of feel to the customer that he is getting something. But today, as we know, most of us don't use this facility, right? In last probably 1 year plus that I'm using Airtel, I wouldn't have made a single landline phone call to anybody because the mobile phone calls have become so cheap that this is almost a facility they're giving which has no value, but it's a sort of feel good kind of a factor to me, right? So in something as commoditized as a broadband data service, they have been able to successfully create, a choice. Now, how many choices should we create, right? Probably you can create like this, maybe 10, 20 choices. But there's a science behind that. A lot of studies have been done. We say that, something between 3 to 5 choices being given to the customer is a good idea. Because beyond 5, the customer starts to get confused. This has actually happened with me. A lot of you would have experienced this in the past, probably, that if there is too much of a choice, we are not able to make decisions, correct? For example, personally, at least with me, if I go to a sari shop, there's so much of variety. I don't know how my wife makes a decision, right? That's a skill. But when I go to a shirt shop, I go with a reasonably sort of made up my mind after thinking, and I just choose within that, because otherwise I start getting very confused, right? And many of us do get confused, right? Unless it's a product where you will try to really get involved and explore quite a lot, correct? So this element of creating a choice for the customer is very important. You are targeting different micro segments within the same customer segment that you are looking at, so you're not leaving any value on the table. You're not giving this 3,999 plan to somebody who's buying it for, let's say, 1,500 and leaving value on the table. So what we call value capture, you're doing a good amount of value capture. You're doing a proper kind of a bundling of a complementary product, and then you are giving different choice to the customer, because customer now has got the choice and he can make a sort of decision within this framework. It will be difficult for us to compare this directly with, let's say, Geo Broadband or something like that, right? So then sometimes if we are happy with this, we give up that detailed comparison and we move on with the current choice that is given to us. That's one important study that you can look at. Many companies are using it, and I think you will see a lot of instances of how this kind of a sort of choice is given to us, right? Moving on, of course we'll have the question and answer session in the end. So I think you can ask me questions at that time, and maybe you can sort of put the questions in the chat window right now, so that our moderators can ask that later. So the next one that I spoke about was using anchoring, right? Price anchoring, and also creating a decoy, right? So these two sort of are not same, but they go hand in hand. So the first example of the 3 popcorn, it is typically given as an example. So this 3 popcorn strategy is sort of very popular, right? So there is a very small cone which probably is sufficient for only one person, or maybe if 2 people are there, they will get just a small portion. And this is a reasonably big one, right? And we actually see this in the movie halls when we go to INOX or any other place. And then there is a large one, right? So in the first case, by they pricing them at $3, 6.5, and maybe at $15, what is done is that the anchor is set very high, right? When you look at a $15 one, you can definitely see that it is giving you more value. Obviously, there's more popcorn in that bucket, right? I think maybe it's at least 1.75 times. I mean, that's my visual impression of what is there in the second choice, which is $6.5, right? So I'm getting more value there. But then I start comparing, where am I getting more popcorn, right? Is it worth buying two popcorns of $6.5? Will I get something more, right? So again, what you're doing is you're playing with the customer's mindset, and the customer is now making the choice within the options that are provided, correct? And then you are using a high price anchor. So you are setting the anchor at 15. And lot of studies have been done on this. If you would like to read a book called, I think, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, by Daniel Kahneman, and he has got 2, I think, Nobel Prizes. And Daniel Kahneman has done a lot of experimentation. You would have seen, I think, there was a serial that used to run called Brain Games on Discovery. You would have seen that, and they would have demonstrated how the anchoring is used as a very efficient technique, right? To plant some ideas in your mind and then play around with that. So this technique is widely used in media. For example, how media manipulates us, and then it's also used a lot in the marketing, right? So you can use anchoring as a very good technique. Set the anchor high in the mind, so that the next one which is there, it starts sort of looking good, right? So that's one technique. Another way of using the similar technique but in a different way is to use a decoy, right? In the second case, as you can see, there's a $3 popcorn, there's a $6.5, and there's a 7.1. Now, as you can see that, this 6.5 is clearly a decoy that stands out, right? Between 6.5 and $7, there is hardly any difference in price, but you're getting almost double quantity in $7. So natural, and if you compare that with the $3 one, obviously $3 doesn't appear like a good choice unless you are the only person, right? You will not be able to eat that $7 thing. So $6.5 is just a decoy over here, right? It is sort of just, sort of makes it easier for you to take a decision to go for $7, and then you can very well justify the decision. One of the things we as individuals want to do is to always justify our decisions, good or bad, right? So if I buy a very, let's say, I buy a very high priced phone, right? Let's say Apple. It is very difficult for me to, when I'm talking to a friend who has a Samsung or some other phone, to admit, okay, this phone is not working. I'm not saying Apple doesn't work, but if it is not working, I'll not admit that, because it will, sort of convey that I have not taken a right decision, right? So most of us would sort of, use some kind of a justification when we are buying, and this decoy is giving a fantastic justification for buying something which is priced at a $7. This is one more thing we can do when we are, pricing our products. Moving on, the another example that I would like to talk about is, something called pay per use, right, or pay per drink. So I mean, these concepts are not new, right? So they existed in the physical world, correct? So when we go to consume tea, for example, we just pay for what we are using, right? But this has been implemented very well by various organizations. I would just take an example of a Pune-based organization which is into cloud and other services. So as you can see, they are sort of, cloud is, again, you can call it a commodity product. How do you distinguish between two cloud services, right? I mean, we do need certain features, and if we are enterprise customer, we'll go and look into all those details if we have that kind of a technological competence. But if you look at somebody like me using, running a boutique firm, I may not have that much technological competence to go and look at various kinds of email services. But now this makes it very simple for me to look at, what I am getting in return, what I am paying for that, and then as I start using more and more of cloud space, I pay more, right? So, and that's very clearly, transparent to me how much I'll be paying, and then all those features, etc., are very clearly given there. Carrier get business email, and spam, virus, malware, etc. Those features are very well, displayed over there, right? So I am paying for what I use, right? And that is a very, very great, that is a fantastic feeling. Because none of us wants to pay for something and not use it, right? So end of the day, I mean, if I mean, most of us wouldn't like to, leave a food on the table, correct? Not because we are, sort of being stingy or something like that. We just don't like to waste things, correct? So this gives me a very good, idea of how much I'll be paying, and in my mind, I can justify that because I'm paying for use, right? And this has been used for a lot of, cloud services. So Amazon, etc., initially came up with this. You can simply keep adding uh, uh, the space in the back end, and easily it gets extended, right? So any kind of a product where you can easily keep on charging the customer additional, I think that is a fantastic thing, and slowly the customers get used to that and they start consuming more and more. And this strategy is very good for pricing those products where the customer is likely to consume more and more of the product, if you keep on offering him in that model. For example, let's say in the physical world, for example, if there is a wafers, right? So if I am getting wafers which are, let's say, 30 grams packet, and that's priced at, let's say, for example, 15 rupees, and the 20 rupees I am getting 50 grams package, right? Easily in my mind I can compare, 50 grams is a better deal. Now there are two things happening here. The customer is walking in, you are selling him a high value product, that is number one, right? At one point in time, so, and then your cost might not be increasing proportionately, because that you don't have to do more additional effort to market that 50 gram product or get it onto the retailer shelf. The third thing that happens is, once normally we open a wafers package, we don't leave anything inside, right? So we consume more, right? So whenever the customer is likely to consume more, creating this kind of a strategy makes sense, right? So we are seeing that all these strategies are used in combination. The next one is basically freemium, that I think many of us are aware about this. For example, we are doing this. This webinar is happening over Zoom, right? And we know, for example, Zoom as a product which gives you something for free, right? I just looked up, and there's a lot of controversy happening about around Geo team, which has been launched just now, right? So I'm not sure about how their is priced. I have to look that up. But Zoom, for example, has a similar kind of the pricing. Here I have taken the example of Canva, which is one of the leading products if you want to do some kind of graphic designs, etc., etc. So there is a free product which helps, which gives you something like some 8,000 plus free templates are given, 100 plus design. Now, what is freemium doing is it is onboarding the customer without asking him to pay anything. Right, that's very very important. So customer has the comfort. A customer who has very meager requirements, he can come and try out your product, get comfortable, see the value, and then he will also realize you will keep showing them features that are available only in Pro, right? Don't hide those features from them, but just don't let them use it, so that they are constantly reminded, this is available in my product, but this is available if you upgrade, right? That's one of the very important things. Keep telling the customer this is additional thing available. Right now you are missing it, but if you upgrade, you are going to get this, right? The reason Zoom used to cut off that meeting, I think during COVID they extended, but they used to cut off the meeting at 40 minutes is for us to understand, okay, if I subscribe for the paid plan, then I'm going to get sort of 24 hours I can run my meeting, right? So free, giving something to free to the customer, and then making him getting used to it, making him comfortable in using the product, and then migrating to a sort of different options. Again, within that you should have variants which are comfortable for each customer segment, right? They're aligned to his needs and are priced appropriately, right? So that's what you do when you do freemium. There's a fair degree of research that has been done around this also. Whenever something is available free, they say that different, and actually they scanned human mind, the brain, to see which part of the brain gets triggered when the word free is used, right? And whenever we see the word free, some different parts, sort of chemistry happens inside the brain. Our brain gets sort of attracted to that, right? And there is a saying that customers want everything for free and they will pay anything to get it, right? And we have seen these examples in physical world. We get a call saying you have won some something in some contest, you have won something, and then that person will not be telling you exactly where we entered into a contest, and they will say you have to come to this hotel and you have to spend 2 hours with us, and we'll give you this, you have to come there and collect this gift for free, right? So what is happening is basically it's a program where they want to market some product. They want you to sit there for 2 hours and listen to something, and then give you maybe 200 or 300 rupees, product for free, right? Because that free word, maybe for that person will travel 15 kilometers across the city with his wife, right, in an evening on a Sunday, and then spend that time because he's getting some 300 or 400 rupees worth of product free. But if he was to use his mind, it's really not worth it, right? So freemium is a fantastic, sort of strategy to adapt, and sort of get the customer used to the product, prove the value to them, right? The customer will understand the value when he uses that, and then move him to the best possible next pricing tier, right? That's one great strategy we can use. Moving on, this is an example of I think next slide. Yeah. So one more is bundling, unbundling the product or the features, and then modularizing the product, right? See, these strategies go hand in hand, right? In some case, you might use just only one, or you might combine them. For example, using bundling and unbundling, you can create even the product variants, right? What we discussed as a strategy number one. So here is an example of typically a burger outlet, right? What we see there is that you get maybe the Coke for $1.5, fries for something like that, and then the burger is $2, something like that, right? But when they create together a bundle, they give you probably 1/3 of the discount, right? That's typically how 25 to 30% kind of a discount they will give you, correct? Now, what is happening here is, I spoke about doing this kind of a thing in the previous slides. I spoke about, there are cases where customer simply consumes more when you offer him a better deal, correct? Like I spoke to you about wafers, right? once we open a wafers packet, or we sort of open a sort of salted nuts package, we never keep it back, right? That's the tendency of human beings. So you can easily sell smaller quantities more, right? And then you are saving lot of associated marketing costs, product packaging costs, retail shelf, and so on and so forth, right? Delivery costs, by simply giving him additional something worth free. So as I told you, 15 rupees for 30 grams and only maybe 20 rupees for 50 grams, right? So we are giving him, so customer calculates, I am getting much more for free. In this case also, when we go typically, and this has happened to me for a long number of years, I used to go for a meal. Nowadays, if I don't go much, I mean, even before COVID, to consume burgers, etc. But even if I go many times, I would just buy one burger, right? Because I can see that there is a value in going for this bundle, but then I'm consuming something I don't want, and typically these fries, right? So, and then they are sort of adding to our weight, etc. But it is an excellent strategy. Bundle those products that go together. There are different ways of bundling, and when I create the product pricing strategy for the customer, we do a lot of number crunching, right? So I am not able to accommodate that number crunching and show those to you within the time available. But we do a lot of number crunching. So what product should be bundled? There is a lot of study you need to do around that, right? So for example, if I'm offering, let's say, pen, I'm selling pen, what should I sell along with that? Should it be pencil or should it be something else, right? Which should be the higher margin product, right? Should we sort of bundle a new product that we want to introduce, right, and make it available almost at a zero cost, right? So those kind of things we have to think. The opposite of bundling is unbundling. Sometimes it makes sense of unbundling the products and selling them separately, right? So a couple of companies that I have seen, they had a sort of IT product or some other product. They have unbundled that product, because what they have found is selling that entire product to a customer is at times a very difficult decision-making process. It's a process that involves a lot of time for evaluation. It's a process that requires a lot of business change management on the customer side, and it also requires a lot of cost, right? So by unbundling those products, they are able to sell certain niche portions of the product to the customer. So the reverse of bundling is also a good strategy at times. Let us take example of typically an ERP system, right? Selling an ERP system today to a larger size organization is by and large out of question, right? Most of them, I'll not say all, most of them have some kind of enterprise ERP system in place, right? So they'll have to replace the existing system. So that becomes a challenge, justifying that decision becomes a challenge. But if you have one bundle, let's say you have HRMS or CRM or something which is very good, and you can bundle some portion and sell it to the customer, you will even get slightly better price if you look at the total functionality, right? So bundling, unbundling is again one of the very good strategies that you can use, and you can make sort of additional sales, as well as you can protect your margins as well, right? So that is something that works in the product environment as well. So moving on. So we looked at these various strategies, and so if you go back and look at those strategies, the next slide please. It has lot of impact on all these strategic decisions that we are talking about, right? Depending on the price that you have, for example. Next slide please. Depending on the price that we set, for example, our funding decisions will get changed. The investments that we get, the return on investment, all those aspects will change depending on that. So whenever, let's say, we are building a financial model for a business to do their business forecasting and go to the investors for investment, all these aspects change depending on how we price the product, because depending on the price, our business development plan changes, the customer segmentation can change, the kind of channels we will use to go to the customer, the conversion ratios, the kind of marketing spend, the sales incentive plans. So all of these can be impacted by the pricing decisions, and all of these in turn impact the pricing decisions. So they have to be in sync. So if you looked at those 5 strategies, they are looking at most of these elements they are looking at. Just to take an example, the bundling can take care of your marketing cost to a certain extent, because you are selling to the same customer, sort of a combination of products, right? Your revenues can be more, your profitability you can manage if you create the appropriate bundle of products, right? As I said, in case of wafers or in case of meal, we tend to consume more, right? We might eat fries when we don't want to eat, right? You can manage your cost better, because the biggest cost in running a restaurant, for example, is a fixed cost, which is around rent, furniture and salaries and so on and so forth. You can manage your cost better. You can your cash flows can be better if you're selling higher to the customer at one point in time. 30 grams wafer versus 50 grams. Obviously, a lot of more cash is coming into my business, right? So all these aspects are to be taken into account when selecting a particular strategy or a combination of strategy, right? So at this juncture, I'll just let's just take a little bit of a pause. And again, similar question that I asked earlier, I would like to ask you again. So now based on what we have seen so far in last about 25 to 30 minutes, would you like to now link your product pricing strategy with important strategic decisions in future, right? So what your point of view on that in terms of different strategies that we have seen? So we'll just start the poll now, and please go ahead and vote. So the first choice is no, we don't intend to link for whatever reasons. Second is yes, no, maybe we will do it, but we are not sure how. And yes, I think we will go ahead and link the product pricing strategy with important other strategic decisions in the future, right? So I just want to get a the handle on how do you feel now in terms of the linkage of product pricing strategy with the other strategic elements of the business. So please go ahead and vote on this. Choices are very simple. It should be easy to sort of decide on what we're going to do for the future. Right. So, earlier we had about 46% or something like that saying yes, we will link, but now about 85% are saying, and only about 3% are saying we don't intend to link. So, thanks a lot for the feedback. So, I think it's very important for us to link the pricing with the other elements of strategy, because they don't stand alone, right? When mainland China, for example, prices a meal at X, then the next time we want to go out for celebrating birthday, we don't compare mainland China with something else, but we might just compare with something like Barbecue Nation. And so, pricing even sort of sets your positioning in the marketplace, right? So, very important that, we get the pricing in link with the other elements of strategy. Thanks for the feedback. So just, on this note, just would like to say what E J Bouter, so you can read his book as well, besides, of course, buying my book. Impact of pricing is always greater than that of the other three profit drivers, right? So we discussed that sales volume, fixed cost, and variable cost. So as you would have seen, if we price properly, if we spend adequate amount in analyzing business, understanding customer, pricing the products, creating those different kind of variants, and so on and so forth, we can get much better return than merely focusing on the cost. And if we do both of these things together, then I think that's the best thing to do, right? So thanks for listening in very patiently. I understand, and again, I apologize for being almost 10 minutes late to join for some reason. And I think we would like to open up for the question and answers now.
Great.
Please go ahead and ask the questions. Again, sorry for the delay.
We understand, Shailendra. Thank you so much for this very informative session. We have received multiple questions. Let me share those questions with you.
Please.
So, Shilpa J, she has a question here. How do you apply these 5 strategies for SaaS HWS model?
Right. So if you look at let me just go back. Okay. So if you look at the one that I presented, pay per use, right? So pay per use strategy is very much in sync with SaaS. So I won't be able to answer very specifically about that product, Shilpa. I need to understand more. But what we have seen here, for example, this example on pay per use, right? If you can go back to that slide, please. There's a slide around the different cloud and cloud storage plans around email, right? So that is very much software as a service, correct? But obviously the cloud is something different. And if we also go to the Canva example, right? Freemium. So you in SaaS we can very well implement a freemium option, again depending on the product. For example, for ERP kind of solution, obviously it's difficult to give the freemium option. But if it's a very niche product, you can give a free version available for some time with limited functionality, and I'll assure you it works very, very well, right? It very clearly demonstrates the value to the customer, your confidence level, and once the customer is getting used to the product, it is relatively easier to migrate him to a paid version, right? Because we are all creatures of comfort. Maybe most of us are using Microsoft Windows even today. Bill Gates has started charging us every year what he used to charge us, lifetime, right? 10 years back. But still we are using it because most of us are used to, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Right? So once you make the customer used to that, you can, easily convert him to a paid customer at the appropriate point in time. I'm not saying that he will just pay anything for that, but as long as the pricing is appropriate, he will move to the next available paid version, right? So I think that is clearly something that we can do in a software as a service model. Beyond that, specifically in your case, I need to understand a bit more. So sorry, I'll not be able to answer right away.
That's not
Thanks,
a
Shilpa.
problem. We can get it answered in the next iteration of our engagement also.
Right.
Uh, we have the second question from Paulson. Paulson is asking, for a B2B SaaS offering, how does one make a choice between providing unlimited features for a limited time versus some features for unlimited time?
That is an excellent question. There are two ways of managing premium broadly, right? So give them everything and let them test everything for the limited period of time, and then give the limited features for unlimited period of time. And both these strategies are being used. So if you look at the Zoom kind of a model, or even the Canva model, which I am showing you, I had shown you right now, it is there on the screen. They are giving you those limited features for unlimited period of time, right? And if you look at some other choices, for example, sorry, I'm not able to immediately come up with a name in my mind, though I'm aware of those companies. So they will give you all the features. So now it depends whether the product being given in a limited version makes sense to the customer, correct? If it's a product that will not demonstrate value to the customer by giving him limited features, you'll have to essentially give him all the features, but for a limited period of time, correct? So that is something that will have to be done. And another way is, if your product is so differentiated, let me just take an example of ERP product, right? Maybe you want to, again, the freemium is not greatly suited for ERP, so but I'm just taking it to make a point over here. So you give him full functionality for some time, so that he can test all the functionality, and maybe he will go for only a part of it, right? So because the customer wants to use all, because in many cases, even if you give the full functionality to the customer may not use all the functionality. Secondly, I mean, I have myself, I'll not take the names of the companies. I subscribe to 2 CRM products in their freemium plan and used it for about a month or two, whatever was the free plan, right? But the product is big, in a month or two, I couldn't use it fully for my functionality. So the fact that they're offering me everything free actually sort of turned counterproductive. I was not able to take the decision, because I have to buy that full product, right? So I don't know whether they can create, I have not thought through in that much detail, whether they can create modularization out of that and offer me something small for free for a longer period of time. So again, it depends. I mean, are you able to hook, which way are you able to hook the customer? If you give him a larger product and he doesn't use, he is not going to get converted into a paid customer just because you gave him full functionality. But sometimes giving a limited functionality and making him use that might help convert him into a paid customer. So I hope broadly I have answered your question, Paul.
Thank you. Here is a very interesting question from Puneet. So he asks, if a public limited company follows discriminate pricing strategy predominantly, how can the company justify this to the stakeholders during a time like COVID, where all the segments are affected?
Okay, I don't know in exactly which I mean, I got the COVID context, but when you said public limited company and discrimination, I mean, I'm not sure, but I think Zoom is a listed company in US, right? And I think they are following this strategy currently. So I'm not able to understand exactly where this is coming from. But even Zoom is, for example, giving you some 30% special discount right now. If you convert during the COVID period, you convert it to a annual plan, right? From monthly to annual, so you're getting a discount of around 1 month, which was used for annual. They're giving you additional discount, right? So Yes, I agree that the public limited company has to go back and justify to the stakeholders that they are not destroying value and not leaving money on the table. But I look at most of these as executive decisions, and the ultimately the stockholders are going to look at it maybe every quarter, like it happens in case of a listed company. But I think these are executive decisions, and as long as they whatever goals they have set and they have discussed with their investors, I think the fact that they are publicly limited should not come as a problem in discrimination. If you look at all these listed companies, big companies, they are using Airtel. I gave as an example. Coke does discrimination. We saw that as an example. KFC, McDonald's, all many of these are listed companies, and they do price discrimination. I don't think that uh, in COVID times, etc., has that kind of impact. Whatever makes business sense for them at that point in time, I think that is a workable model. Well, probably I didn't get your context fully, Olson. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you. So Puneet, what I suggest is please ask your, anyways, you have asked a question on our LinkedIn thread. We will get this answered. Now, here is another question from Rohit. How should a startup price its B2B tech product uh, during its first launch? It may be difficult to price on based on value because value is basically based on assumptions
Hmm.
at this stage.
Right, right. So a couple of things. So I think yes, I agree the value is based on assumptions, and that's why there are two, three ways of handling this. One is having a customer as a co-creation partner, right? When you're creating a product, I mean, obviously, if the product is now in the market, it's a late situation for that. But many B2B products have been successfully built by co-creating the product with the customer, because then you are able to not just ensure that you are actually handling the customer's critical business needs, and then you are also able to discriminate between critical needs versus nice to have kind of things. You're also able to get from that customer what is the value that is being delivered, right? So product co-creation is something that I think in the B2B segment is something to be very well thought about. If you can get the customer to co-create a product with, I'm telling you that is fantastic. I know of people who have done it very, very well, co-created the product. Even the big products like SAP have been built initially by co-creating them with the customers. They are built for specific companies, and then sort of they went from there. So that is one thing that I will tell you. Second is yes, in terms of quantifying the value, it requires a very deep understanding of what the customers need. It is possible to quantify the value to a very large extent, and in fact, I have worked on a couple of engagements to do that, because justifying ROI is a very important criteria in the B2B side of the business, right? Because customers want to know that. So it is possible to do that. And there are typically some levers which generate value for the customer. And it could be, for example, productivity increase, could be, for example, the reduced penalties from better compliance with the customer, etc. Right? So there are ways to identify those levers, and it is possible to quantify the value delivered to a certain extent. But I agree. I mean, unless you have tested the product with the customer, your customer will always question some aspects of it. But what I will urge you to, start putting it down, create your own model for, what is the value you are delivering to the customer, what is the investment customer is making, and third is the what is the timing of those cash flows, and actually build a ROI model and demonstrate to the customer that this is the value we are delivering. Initially, your model may not be good, but as you talk to more and more customers, I think within 6 months to a year, you should be able to build a very good working model, right? So I think that is the way to go.
Great. Thank you. Nalana Murali Krishna, this would have answered your question also, I assume. Now, there's a question from Sumana. Appropriate price discovery takes time. So, do we start high and go down to gain volumes, or start low and then increase as demand pick up?
Uh, I think this is a good question, but I think the we can avoid this trap by having the product versions, right? I think it is. I've worked with few customers who are having just one price point and one product in the market. It took us quite some time, to sort of dissect through the entire product, modularize it, and then say, okay, we will create these particular product versions. Right? I'll give you an example. I'll tell you exactly the price points. They were about 499. All everybody was being sold at 499, right? That's a tech product. Now we created the product versions which was actually 599, 999, and 1999, and we got customers at all these three price points. Right? Earlier the whole product was given for 499. So I think you should very carefully look at, can you create different product versions? That is one thing, and I think we looked at that in this. That will solve your problem, right? The second is, start high. No, I think there are other options available. For example, there are marketplaces where they buy in bulk um, from the product vendors. You would have heard of something called AppSumo, for example, and there are few other sort of communities. So AppSumo, for example, in US is a community of about 10,000 micro or small entrepreneurs, and what they do is you can sell their product through them, and then they expect really very special deals. What you can do is you can set a certain low price point, sell it to those customers. I'm just giving an example. Say to those customers, validate the product, validate the ROI for first 6 months, and then go for the market. And then you can charge a different price to the market, right? Because this was a special deal, one-time offer that you offered to them. You got a certain number of customers, you got your cash flows coming in, you got the product validated, you get case studies to talk about, right? And then you go out to the general market, and then you price it appropriately. That is another way of getting around this kind of a problem.